Hi, I am Elowen Price, the daughter they said did not belong. My grandfather flew 6 long hours just to watch my brother's wedding, only to be shoved near the trash bins, like he was worthless. My mother sneered, "That old beggar will embarrass us all." When I spoke up, she slapped me hard across the face and ordered me out of the wedding. 20 minutes later, his private jet landed. And the truth that stepped out of it shattered everything they thought they controlled. Ungrateful. Embarrassing, my grandfather said, steady as stone. No, the only one who remembers what family means is her. If it were you, would you have stayed silent or risked everything to defend him? Share where you're watching from in the comments and subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for supporting this channel. I arrived at Vincent's wedding, wearing a dress I had bought second-hand, on a chilly spring afternoon in Boston. Forest green, capped sleeves, soft, simple, about the only thing in my closet that still made me feel remotely like myself. The sun in Glen Haven was sharp that day, casting long shadows across the stone path leading into the vineyard. The scent of roses and grilled duck floated through the air, and champagne everywhere. Someone was handing someone else a flute of it. No one offered me one. A waiter walked right past without a glance. Guests milled about in designer gowns, tailored suits. Hair slicked back with product I probably could not even pronounce. I caught my reflection in one of the glass doors. Wind-tossed hair. No makeup. Freckles peeking through. I looked like someone who had been invited by mistake. Evelyn spotted me from across the patio. She made a slow approach, lips pursed, eyes narrowing, like she was reviewing damage. "You look..." She paused. Her eyes swept from my shoes, up to my neckline. Decent. That was it. No hug. No, "You made it all the way from Boston." Not even a nod to the fact that I had RSVP'd alone, while everyone else had arrived in 2s, 3s, or entire entourages. I barely got a word in, before she turned and drifted off to greet someone with a tighter dress and a higher net worth. Vincent did not notice me at all, or pretended not to. He was too busy laughing with his college friends near the olive trees, one hand glued to a glass of something amber, the other wrapped around Claudia's waist. She wore ivory lace that looked like it cost more than my entire graduate school tuition. When her eyes met mine, there was no recognition, only polite disinterest. We had met twice. I wandered around the edge of the gathering, pretending to look for someone. Anyone. I had not come to cause a scene. I had come because for all their flaws, they were still my family. And then I saw Silas. A town car pulled up slowly at the edge of the gravel circle. The door opened, and out stepped Silas Whitford, stooped but still upright, dressed in a dark blue suit, one he probably had not worn since Eleanor's funeral. His tie was crooked. His knuckles were spotted, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. "Elowen," he rasped, voice thin but certain. "You are the only one worth flying for." I held on to him for a long second, breathing in the faint smell of aftershave and peppermint gum. He had flown 6 hours across the country for this, at 82. No one else seemed to care. No one else even walked over. I offered to help him find his seat. A staffer beat me to it, waving us toward the far side of the patio, past the flower arch, past the pond around the outdoor kitchen. And there it was, one plastic chair, wedged near 2 overflowing trash bins, next to the humming heat vents from the catering tent. My chest went tight. There must be some mistake here. The staffer shrugged, checked a chart, and walked off briskly. I turned to Evelyn, who stood not 20 feet away, adjusting her bracelet in the sunlight. "Why is Grandpa sitting there like that?" I asked. Her gaze flicked past me like I was background noise. He insisted on coming. I told him he would not enjoy himself. But beggars cannot be choosers. He is not a beggar. Not ever. My voice was low but firm. She leaned in closer. Her whisper was sharp as the summer air. "That old man will embarrass us the way he talks, the way he eats, the way he smells." You are serious. Really serious. I looked at her. Truly looked. Her face was taut cold. She was not even pretending. I walked away, fists clenched at my sides. But it was not over. Not for me. As guests began taking their seats for the rehearsal dinner, I rose from the table where I had been quietly planted next to the valet's son. Yes, really, and stepped onto the small platform near the welcome arch. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, gently tapping a fork against my glass. Conversations died. Dozens of faces turned toward me. I just wanted to ask something important. My voice trembled. I took a breath. Why is my grandfather seated near the trash bins, while strangers are at the family table? There was a long silence, then the sharp click of heels. Evelyn stormed up the aisle, her hand raised before I could even register it. The slap cracked across my face like a gunshot. Gasps rose from the crowd. "You ungrateful thing, you shameful girl," she hissed. Her cheeks flushed. "You do not belong here." She turned to a nearby staffer. "Escort her out right now." I stumbled backward, the sting hot across my cheek. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply nodded and began walking, my heels catching in the gravel, the skirt of my dress dragging across dusty stone. Vincent looked away. Thomas straightened his collar and pretended to read the wine list. But Silas' grandpa stood up. He did not say a word. He just met me halfway as I reached the edge of the patio, slipped something into my hand, pressed my fingers around it. A green silk handkerchief, frayed at the corners, stitched with a faded silver K. I did not let go of it. I kept walking until I reached the parking circle, then sat down on a low stone wall under the shadow of an olive tree. The handkerchief sat in my palm like a promise I did not yet understand. My heart did not break. It had already done that years ago. This was only confirmation. They had shown me again, exactly who they were. And then came the sound. Louder than the music inside. A low thunder. Wheels. Jet wheels. The wheels did not sound like any car I knew. It was deeper, smoother, something heavy, moving slow and sure down the gravel side path just behind the vineyard. I turned toward the noise, squinted against the sun. A black Rolls-Royce glided into view, sleek as a shadow, its paint reflecting the gold of the late afternoon sky. Behind it, two smaller SUVs rolled in like a quiet procession. I stayed seated on the stone wall, fingers wrapped tightly around Silas's handkerchief, not daring to hope for anything more. Then the driver's door opened. The chauffeur stepped out with quiet urgency and moved to the rear passenger door. It opened with grace, and there he was, Silas, not hunched and worn like he had seemed just an hour ago, but upright, poised, almost regal. His dark suit was perfectly cut. His shoes gleamed under the late afternoon sun, and over his eyes sunglasses, real ones, not the drugstore kind he used to fumble for. Two men in dark suits followed him out, tall, serious, scanning the area like they knew something the rest of us could not see. He saw me, paused, and pulled off his sunglasses. "Well, sweetheart," he said, voice clear and strong, steadier than I had heard in years. "Are you truly ready to shake things up today?" I stood up slowly. The gravel under my heels shifted, but I did not fall. Not this time. "What is going on here?" I asked, my heart hammering so hard it echoed in my ears. Silas just smiled. Something tight. Knowing. He tilted his head toward the direction of the main venue. I noticed it then. The waitstaff at the gate, 3 young men in black vests, had gone completely still. One whispered something urgent to another. The tallest reached for a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, then hesitated. When Silas took a step forward, they did not stop him. One even opened the side gate. The same gate I had just been pushed through. Humiliated. Discarded. Silas offered me his arm. "Let us see if your brother remembers who actually owns this land, my dear." I blinked at him. "Wait, what do you mean?" But he did not explain. He just kept walking. calm, unhurried. The realization hit like cold water. This place was not some overpriced venue they had rented. No, we were not guests here. We were home. Or at least, Silas was. I fell in step behind him, still gripping the green silk in my hand. The initials K shimmered faintly in the sunlight. It did not feel like a token anymore. It felt like a message, clear, deliberate. As we approached the reception area, music floated out from the open-air patio. The crowd was mid-toast. Evelyn's voice carried amplified and proud, praising Vincent's vision and ambition. The words made my stomach twist into knots. Silas did not flinch. The two men with him stepped ahead just slightly, flanking the wooden entry as the doors swung open. I paused at the edge, staying low behind a hedge of potted olive trees, watching. Heads turned, dozens of them. Then silence. Not the polite kind either, but thick, awkward, disbelieving, the sort that wraps around a room and squeezes the air out. Vincent lowered his champagne glass mid-sip. Thomas went sheet white. Evelyn froze mid-sentence, her hand still holding the microphone. Silas walked straight through the crowd, like he was parting the sea. Eyes did not just follow. They trailed in disbelief, like they were trying to do the math, and simply could not. He stepped up to the small stage beside the string quartet, took the microphone gently from Evelyn's hand. Without a word. She did not resist. She just stepped back, blinking at him like he was not real. I was not going to say anything, Silas began, voice calm, but heavy. I truly did not want to make a fuss. It is a wedding after all. There were small laughs, nervous ones. But then he continued. Maybe it is finally time people knew what really built this family. From where I stood, I saw Thomas's hand twitch toward his pocket. Vincent stared at his shoes. Claudia's parents glanced at one another, clearly confused. The waitstaff had stopped moving altogether, their trays frozen mid-air. I walked in then, not down the aisle, not toward the family table, just through the side entrance. Quiet, steady, and stood near the stone pillar by the reception arch. I did not need to speak. I did not want to. I just watched. One of the security men stood near me, gave a slight nod as if I belonged there all along. I reached into my pocket, ran my fingers along the threads of the handkerchief again. For the first time that day, I did not feel small. Silas kept going. I am 82, he said plainly. I built this vineyard with these very hands. I named it after my late wife, Eleonora. I gave it to the family. Trusted it would be used for something good. He turned slightly, eyes sweeping over the stunned guests. But when I flew here today, no one knew, because no one bothered to ask if I would even be invited. I was not. My name was not on the list. The driver did not even recognize me at the gate. If you have ever felt invisible at your own family's table, or been treated like you did not matter until the truth came out, share your thoughts below. Commenter number 1, if you know that pain. There was a shift in the crowd. Small gasps, murmurs spreading. I sat near the trash bins, he said dryly, right next to the kitchen vent. Now, I am not much for fanfare, but I know the difference between a seat and a message. He turned toward my parents, and I received the message loud and clear. The silence was crushing now. Evelyn clutched the back of a chair, her fingers white. Thomas stared at the floor. Vincent still had not moved. I stood still. I did not flinch. I did not cry. That moment was not about revenge. It was not even about justice. It was truth spoken plain. And then Silas said 7 words that made the whole room stop breathing. The air inside that glass-ceiling reception hall thickened, in a way no summer afternoon ever should. His voice cut through the murmurs, like a slow knife through silk. I built this entire empire for her, not you. For a moment there was only silence, an eerie, breathless kind. Then gasps, then forks clinked against porcelain as hands trembled. Even the pianist stopped mid-note. I felt every eye shift toward me as I stood near the rear of the room, no longer in the shadows. I had not moved closer on purpose, just instinct, but now I stood there, not hiding any more. Silas lifted a hand and pointed. Her, he said again, firmer this time. Claudia leaned into her friend, whispered softly, "Who exactly is she supposed to be?" The photographer, who had just been snapping candids of the champagne toast, lowered his camera slowly, like even the lens had gone blurry with confusion. I heard my own breath, before I realized I was holding it. The green handkerchief in my palm felt like it anchored me firmly to the floor. Silas took another step forward. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He just looked Thomas square in the eye. "I left the land in her name, because she was the only one who visited me when I was truly sick. You remember that, do you not, Thomas?" My father's face lost all its performative glow. That polished, charismatic smile he always wore at events like this, gone. He looked like a man whose stage lights had just shorted out. "You changed the form," Silas continued steadily. "Did you not?" While I was still recovering. My chest tightened. The memory hit before I could stop it. The winter 3 years ago. The pneumonia scare. Everyone else was too busy, or traveling. I was the one who drove up through icy roads and sat with him in that drafty cabin. I brought soup. I read aloud. I took his calls in the middle of the night when his breathing scared him. And then silence. After a few weeks, his number stopped ringing. I assumed he had recovered and pulled back. Evelyn whispered something quickly to Vincent. Her lips barely moved. Silas raised a hand sharply. "Do not. Not today." The entire room had gone quiet again. The kind of quiet that makes you painfully aware of the smallest sound. Someone's bracelet slid down their wrist with a soft jingle. A baby cried faintly outside. But inside, it was just truth hanging heavy in the air. Then Silas reached into his blazer and pulled out an envelope. He turned, walked toward me, and offered it with steady fingers. I stepped forward, meeting him halfway. "This is yours," he said, handing me the envelope. "It always was, Elowen." My fingers shook as I took it, but I did not open it. I just stared at the heavy cream-colored paper, sealed, notarized, dated. "He changed that will," Vincent blurted suddenly, stepping forward with his hands slightly raised, like trying to calm a riot. "Whatever that is, it is not legal. He changed it months later." One of our uncles, Evelyn's cousin, I think, stood from his table and asked, "Is that really true?" I finally looked at the envelope. The date printed clearly across the top was 2 months before Silas's illness, before the pneumonia, before the silence. Silas's voice rose, not loud, but thunderous in its weight. "You told the lawyer I was mentally unfit. You forged the medical affidavit. While I was sedated in bed, you used my hospital stay as cover." Then Silas slammed his cane down on a nearby table. The sharp crack made several guests jump in their seats. "You stole it. Not from me. From her, my granddaughter." I felt heat rush up my neck. Thomas said nothing. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Vincent stared at his shoes like they might offer some secret escape, and then I understood. The phone calls that had stopped, the silence, the sudden change in how my family acted. They had gone quiet not because Silas had pushed me away, but because they had, because they cut off his voice and mine at the very same time. I did not cry, but my hands kept trembling. People began to stir. One woman in a navy dress whispered, "This is turning very ugly." Another said softly, "I saw that girl with Mr. Whitford at the farmer's market last fall. He held her hand like a daughter would be held." Vincent stepped forward, trying desperately to corral the attention again. "Look, this is not the time or the place," he pleaded. "Yes," I said for the first time, my voice clear. "Yes, it absolutely is." My voice did not tremble. I did not shout. I just said it like fact. You threw me out. Remember. You told me I did not belong here. You said Silas was embarrassing. You all sat him behind the trash bins like he was disposable. And now you worry about timing. The silence that followed was different this time. No longer shocked, just exposed. Silas stepped up to the stage, walked straight to the officiant, and leaned toward the microphone. He looked out at the crowd. Not a hint of apology in his eyes, only hard resolve. And like someone who had waited years for the right moment, then he said, "Cancel the wedding. This family needs a reckoning first." The officiant's hands trembled as he slowly closed the leather-bound book in front of him. You could hear the pages settle the way still water does after a stone is thrown in. He glanced nervously at Silas, who stood just feet away, still gripping his cane like it was the only thing anchoring him to the room. "Are you absolutely certain, sir?" the officiant asked, voice brittle, unsure. Silas gave a single heavy nod. "There will be no vows today. This family is about to split down the middle, and no one makes promises while standing on broken ground." Claudia's hands flew to her mouth. "What? What is happening right now?" she choked out, mascara already streaking beneath her eyes. Vincent did not move, his face locked in something between disbelief and dread. Around the room, guests began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Dresses rustled, chairs squeaked, and for a moment no one said a word. Me. I stood motionless, arms stiff at my sides, like I was watching a slow-motion fire tear through a home I used to live in. And that was when Silas spoke again, louder this time, addressing the entire crowd. "Some of you may have heard whispers. I will speak plainly." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim folder, worn but deliberate. "After my medical records were mysteriously sealed," he said firmly, "I hired someone, a private investigator, and he found more than I ever expected." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He walked over to a small table near the center of the room and laid out a series of photographs, documents, and what made everyone lean forward, printed screenshots. "These," he said, tapping one image, "are surveillance stills taken just after midnight 3 months ago." Everyone strained to see. One image was of Thomas entering a building that looked like a legal office. Another showed him again, same place, different night. Next to those, a copy of an affidavit supposedly signed by Silas declaring him mentally unfit to manage the estate. The signature was wobbly, loose, not at all like Silas's steady cursive, the one I had seen all my life on birthday cards and checkbooks. A gasp shot out from somewhere behind me, then another followed quickly, and then I turned toward Vincent. His eyes met mine for the briefest second, and dropped immediately. "You knew this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper but sharp as glass. He did not answer right away. Instead, he shifted his weight, as if the floor had suddenly gone unstable beneath him. I did not want to go along with it," he said, voice cracking under the strain. "Mom said it was just temporary, just until Grandpa, you know, until he was better." I did not move. He took a step forward, trying desperately to close the space between us. "I did not know they would cut you out completely. I swear, Elowen, I had no idea they would go that far." Silas's voice cut through the room like a cleaver. "And yet you were the first one to lock her out of the vineyard. You changed the security codes. You barred her from the harvest celebration. You watched her name get erased. And you still said absolutely nothing." Vincent looked like he had been slapped. Behind me, one of the bridesmaids slipped off her heels. She muttered under her breath, "I did not sign up for this circus." Off to the right, Claudia's father motioned to an attendant. "Bring the car around. We are done here." The room was falling apart fast. Claudia sobbed into her hands. Her veil drooped down her back like a flag at half-mast. Her mother kept glancing from Silas to the documents, then back to her husband. The tension was thick enough to chew, and me, I just stood there. The sting from Evelyn's slap earlier still echoed on my cheek. A phantom burn I could not ignore, but I refused to touch it. I would not give her the satisfaction. She was watching me now, glaring as if daring me to speak again. And I did. You told me I did not belong here, I said, turning to face her fully. You made it painfully clear. Every birthday I was not invited to. Every holiday dinner where my chair was mysteriously missing. Every time you called me ungrateful because I would not give you money for Vincent's wedding. She hissed back, eyes narrowed. You still do not belong. You never did. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I used to believe that I said quietly, each word deliberate. I used to think I was the black sheep, the disappointment, the outsider. But now I see clearly. I was never the embarrassment here. You were. Gasps again. A few people clutched their pearls. Literal pearls. One uncle turned abruptly and walked out. A distant cousin near the cake table grabbed her purse, like it might shield her from whatever came next. Vincent did not move. Claudia crumbled into a chair, shaking uncontrollably. Thomas clenched his jaw and looked away. And then through the silence, Silas reached into another inside pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped toward me. His eyes, fierce, exhausted, proud, met mine. He extended a folded paper. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with a seal. I never stopped believing in you. Not for one moment, he said, voice low, but firm, and they will not erase you ever again. I looked down. It was the deed to the vineyard. My name was printed right on top. Silas's hand lingered in the air, just a second longer than expected, before the deed landed gently in my lap. The paper was not pristine. Its edges curled slightly, a faint coffee ring staining one corner. But the signature, bold, deliberate, unmistakably Silas's, stared up at me like a secret that had waited too long in the dark. I did not say anything at first. My fingers grazed the ink slowly, then curled tighter around the edges, like I was not sure if I should protect it or tear it in half. Silas sat beside me on the long leather sofa, his posture straighter than I had seen in years. He looked tired, not from age, but from something deeper, like a man who had carried too much weight buried inside for far too long. You checked the signature twice already, he said quietly. It is real, Elowen. I nodded. I know it is. That is not the part that is hard to believe. He exhaled through his nose slowly. I made the change the very day I saw your mother throw out your college admission letter. Stanford. Was it not? I blinked. I had not thought about that day in years. You saw that. She told the housekeeper it was just junk mail. He murmured, but I recognized the envelope, and I recognized her face when she tossed it away. That was the exact moment I knew. Something had gone very wrong. I tried to form words, but the air in my chest refused to move. All I could get out was, "Why did you never tell me I wanted to?" he said, voice low but sure. But I thought protecting you quietly was safer than putting you in the middle of a war. He paused, eyes narrowing. Turns out I underestimated just how far they would truly go. The room was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall, and the occasional shift of the firewood in the hearth. Outside the west window, the vineyard's nightlights dotted the slope like scattered lanterns guiding ghosts home. He leaned back, fingers clasped tightly on his knee. I entrusted a lawyer in San Francisco to hold everything until your 30th birthday. That was the plan. But you never got anything. Because your mother intercepted it. His voice dipped lower, weighted with bitterness. She forged a medical power of attorney 6 months ago, told the court I was declining, claimed early dementia. It gave her the right to override every legal instruction I had left. I stared at him, stunned. She filed the paperwork with your uncle's notary, and sealed it with a physician's note from her friend, someone who has not examined me in over 10 years. So even this deed was technically legal when I signed it, but with the power of attorney in place, it was voided in practice. They had the upper hand, Elowen. They just did not count on me showing up today. I rubbed my temples slowly. This whole time I thought I was just disappointing them. Not enough. Not successful like Vincent. Not worth fighting for. You were never the failure, Elowen, Silas said firmly. You were always the threat. The words landed hard. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees, staring into the fireplace. Every meeting where Vincent cut me off mid-sentence. Every time Evelyn said I was too sensitive. Every holiday where I ended up in the kitchen, doing dishes alone while they toasted to each other's accomplishments. I felt something rising in my throat. Not quite a sob, not quite anger. It was something quieter, something heavier. I wanted so badly to believe family still meant something. I whispered, even when it hurt so much. Silas looked at me with the same expression he wore when I was a child, and fell off my bike but tried not to cry. Family does mean something, he said softly, but not all blood is worthy of that word. Silence stretched between us. My hands tightened around the deed, until the edges bent. What is the point of owning something they already poisoned, I asked. Voice barely above a whisper. Every inch of that vineyard is soaked in their contempt. I would rather burn it down completely. He did not flinch. You could, he said. Or he reached forward, placed a wrinkled hand gently over mine. You could unpoison it with truth instead. I sat back, letting his words settle like dust drifting in the room. Truth. What a strange, powerful thing. It does not erase pain. It just demands you stop pretending it never happened. I did not cry. I did not scream. I sat still with that paper in my lap, and the quiet hum of memories pressing in on me. Eventually I stood, walked over to the corner bookshelf. I pulled down a folder, one I had not touched since college. Inside were pages of notes, sketches, plans, a vineyard redesign I once dreamed of. I had forgotten it was even here. I used to imagine creating a label that honored Eleanor's name, I said, flipping through the pages. Simple, clean, authentic, just like her. She taught me how to prune vines before I even learned how to drive, I added quietly. Silas's eyes lit up with something fierce and gentle all at once. Then that is exactly what we will do. Start there, Elowen, and take it all back. My hand stopped on a sketch of a label. Eleanor's table in soft script across a bottle. I smiled faintly, and for a brief moment, there was peace in the room. Not because the pain was gone, but because for the first time in years, the truth had a place to sit. But that peace did not last, because while I was tracing the outline of a dream I thought I had buried, Evelyn was already setting her next move in motion. One that would make everything I held in my hands feel like kindling waiting for a single match. The crumpled deed still sat on my nightstand when the phone rang. One shrill vibration in the quiet of the early morning hours. I blinked at the screen. Jonas. My stomach clenched tight. I had not heard from him in years, not since he left the vineyard quietly, after Vincent restructured the staff. The call was not long. You need to come right now, Jonas said, his voice hushed. Urgent. They are about to dump everything. I did not ask what he meant. I just grabbed my jacket, my car keys, and the portable voice recorder Silas had handed me earlier. In case they try to bury more than your name, he had said. With eyes that had not blinked since dinner. He wanted to come. But the evening had taken far too much out of him. Record everything he whispered. Do not let them erase her again. By the time I reached the gates of the vineyard, the stars had already started to pale. The gravel cracked under my tires as I pulled up to the back entrance of the facility. The main lights were off, but a sliver of yellow glowed faintly beneath the side door. Jonas stood there. Grey hoodie, ball cap pulled low. His hands were trembling. They are moving fast, he muttered, sliding a key card quickly through the side panel. Follow me closely. And stay quiet. We slipped through narrow corridors, lined with crates and forgotten barrels, ducking past a small office where the computer monitor still blinked. Then he stopped, Pinned to the bulletin board was a laminated sheet. Emergency cleaning protocol. Approved and signed by Evelyn. She put it up just last week, Jonas said under his breath. I thought it was only a formality, but tonight. He opened the heavy door to the fermentation chamber. I stepped inside, and the air hit like ammonia. Acrid chemical. Sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. A thin foam clung to the edges of 3 massive steel tanks. One of them hissed faintly. I instinctively pulled my sleeve over my nose. What exactly is that? I asked, backing up quickly. Solvent, Jonas whispered. Industrial grade. Not just for sanitizing. Someone poured it into the tanks. My stomach twisted painfully. This batch. Was it the Syra? He nodded once. Solemn. The very last one your grandmother ever helped blend. I staggered back, hand finding the wall for balance. The sting in my eyes was not only from the fumes. Jonas reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a small USB stick. I copied the security footage before they could wipe it clean. Vincent came in after hours. Twice. And he was not alone. I stared at the little drive trembling in his palm. Why are you showing me this? Because, he said, voice cracking. He offered me 10 grand to say it was an accident. I froze. And you refused? He hesitated. Jaw tight. I took the money. But I told you instead because you are the only one who ever treated this place like more than a trophy. Something cracked in my chest. Not loudly, but the kind of snap you feel deep behind your ribs. Like a rope pulled too tight for far too long. I turned, walked slowly up to the tank. A dull silver beast, stained now with betrayal. My reflection warped across its surface. She spent her very last summer blending this, I whispered. Every night she would come in with her tasting book. Said she wanted one last vintage. Something that could outlive her. Jonas said nothing. He did not need to. They had not just tried to sabotage the wine. They had tried to erase her. I took out my phone. Began photographing everything, the foam, the tank labels, the posted protocol sheet. Jonas handed me a single bottle he had managed to seal from an untouched batch. You will need this for testing, he said firmly. I nodded. My fingers shook as I dropped the USB into my purse. Then I drove. I did not go straight back. I could not. The road stretched ahead, headlights carving long tunnels through the darkness. At a bend past the county line I pulled over. There was a turnout near an old walnut grove. I stepped out of the car, left the driver's door open. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. The sky was starting to shift, inky blue bleeding into a faint strip of pink dawn, and I stood there frozen in the half-light, hugging myself. If I expose this, I said aloud. Voice raw, unsteady. I destroy the family name. My own breath fogged in the air. But if I stay quiet, she dies a second time. I closed my eyes and saw her, Eleonora leaning over a barrel, brushing strands of hair from her face, smiling at me with purple-stained fingers. Wines like memory. She once told me, it keeps who we are if we protect it with care. I did not cry. I just got back in the car, pulled out my old contacts list, and tapped the name of a toxicologist I had once worked with on a college lab project in Santa Rosa. When she picked up, I spoke clearly, forcing calm into my voice. I need a rush analysis. Industrial solvent, possibly methyl ethyl ketone. She said she would meet me in 2 hours. I ended the call. The sky behind me had gone from lavender to gold, light rising steadily, but my chest felt heavier than ever, caught somewhere between rage and grief. I finally stopped asking for their love. I drove the rest of the way in silence, the sunrise barely warming the frost behind my eyes. My fingers clenched the steering wheel, like it might hold me together piece by piece. By the time I reached the vineyard's main office, the parking lot was already half full. Sleek black sedans lined up like they were here for a funeral. In a way, they were. The boardroom was tucked behind thick oak doors at the back of the estate building. I did not knock. I walked in mid-sentence. Vincent was speaking, hands moving like a salesman trying desperately to spin a disaster into an opportunity. He stopped. Everyone stopped. I did not say a word. I placed the bottle of Eleanor's poisoned wine right in the middle of the long table. Then the flash drive. A few people exchanged glances. Evelyn did not bother to hide her disgust. "You do not belong here," she said coldly. "You were already removed from the board." I did not even blink. I walked calmly to the built-in projector, plugged in the drive. The screen on the wall flickered to life. Footage began to play Vincent entering the fermentation wing after hours, glancing over his shoulder, then the timestamp, then the moment he poured something into the tank. Frame by frame, crystal clear. No one spoke. Not until Jonas appeared at the door. "She is telling the truth," he said. Voice low, but steady. "He paid me to stay quiet. I gave the money away to charity, and I brought her here instead." Vincent stood up, face flushed crimson. "This is a setup. Some kind of family vendetta." "Sit down," a legal officer said firmly, one of the shareholders, a quiet man from Napa I barely knew. "This footage, if verified, qualifies as intentional product sabotage. That is felony-level misconduct. And if your name is on that safety override protocol..." He turned to Evelyn. I did not need to say a thing. The camera cut to a photo I had snapped of the emergency protocol. Her signature was stamped across the bottom. "This wine," I finally said, voice catching in my throat, "was the last blend Eleanor helped craft before she passed. You did not just ruin a product. You defiled her memory." Thomas's voice cracked through the silence. "You will destroy us all, Elowen. Think carefully about what you are doing." I said. "I thought about it all night." The door creaked again. This time it was Silas. He moved slowly, leaning on his cane, but his gaze, sharp as ever, swept the room. He did not speak at first, just handed a thick envelope to the attorney trailing behind him. "About a year ago," Silas said, his voice heavy, "I revised the family trust." Whispers rippled across the room. Evelyn stiffened. Vincent looked like someone had just slapped him across the mouth. "I no longer trust this board," Silas said plainly, his voice steady as stone. "Too much ego, too little legacy." Arthur Kincaid cleared his throat. He opened the envelope with deliberate care. Effective immediately. Elowen Price holds full power of attorney over all family operations. The land, the winery, and all associated assets are secured under a separate estate trust under her name. My breath caught, sharp, unsteady. Silas turned to Evelyn, his tone almost gentle, though each word cut deep. "You disowned your daughter out of pride. You called her a burden, an embarrassment, but now it is her name that saves you from collapse." Vincent shoved back his chair violently and stormed out. No one tried to stop him. He slammed the door so hard, the projector flickered against the wall. Evelyn just sat there, blinking rapidly. We were protecting the brand," she murmured weakly. "No," I said quietly, my words sharp as glass. "You were protecting your ego, and you were willing to burn everything to the ground, just to keep control." She looked at me then, not with love, not even with hate, just pure confusion, like I was someone she no longer recognized, but I was not the one who had changed. After the boardroom emptied, I stood there a moment longer, just me, and the silence. The storm had passed, but its aftertaste still lingered in the corners of my mouth, bitter and dry. I gathered the wine bottle, the legal documents, and my grandmother, Eleanor's folded vineyard sketch, the one Jonas had handed me like a quiet offering. My fingers brushed the edges gently, and I held it to my chest as I stepped outside. The evening light stretched long over the hills, turning the vines into shadows that swayed slowly with the breeze. There was something sacred about that time of day, when the sun dipped low but had not quite gone. the kind of hush that invited reflection, not conversation. I did not head to the house. My legs moved on their own, following the path that curved behind the fermentation barn and led to the lower garden, her garden. No one went there anymore. The gravel crunched under my boots. As I reached the bench where she used to hum while pruning, I could almost smell the citrus from her soap, feel her calloused fingers guiding mine. When I was small, when I did not yet know the difference between a strong bud and a lost cause. That place had not changed much, but I had. I crouched beside the old vine where she always kept her small wooden crate. Back then it held gardening gloves, twine, and those strange lozenges she claimed helped her sing better. The soil was dry, cracked with neglect. I ran my hands through it anyway, just to feel closer to her again. That was when I saw something poking out. Metal, dulled and weathered with age. My breath caught sharp in my chest. I dug carefully, dusting dirt away from the edges, until I uncovered a rusted tin box. It was not locked, just latched. My fingers hesitated for a long moment before finally flipping it open. Inside a folded envelope wrapped in linen cloth, and a single dried grape leaf, its stem brittle, but still shaped like a tiny outstretched hand. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable to Elowen. My throat tightened instantly. I opened the envelope slowly, the linen crinkling like fabric that had not seen light in years. Her handwriting curved across the page, with that same steady grace, the kind only a woman who sang to plants and outlasted betrayal could possess. If you are reading this, then you already know the truth. I blinked back the heat rising behind my eyes. They never saw your strength, child. But I did. I saw it when you bandaged small birds, when you gave away your share of pie to Claudia, when you let your mother's silence define your self-worth, just so peace could last one more day.